I'm doing it like I promised. Doing a video about my big emotions, big poses, yoga that I did with the kids yoga at the wellness center. A little bit of an abbreviated version, but hopefully you like it. So the first thing that I really want to discuss is that if there's one thing that I've learned over the past 3 years is that emotions are messengers. They are there, they're not there for any old reason. They're there to give us some sort of information about what's going on internally with us. And a lot of times we are told that emotions are bad, that it's not okay to have emotions. But in reality, the more that we suppress and repress and avoid our emotions, the louder they start to yell and they start to make their presence known even when we don't want them to. So, out of everything that I've been working through on my own journey, I try really hard that if I feel some sort of emotion deep down inside, whether it's feel-good emotions, like maybe happiness, or maybe I'm excited, or I feel strength and I feel strong and brave, or even if they are rougher emotions like feeling sad, or maybe I feel angry, or maybe I feel frustrated, I try really hard to take a moment to feel those emotions inside my body and give myself permission to express those emotions wherever I am. Now, of course, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I may feel it at work, or maybe I feel it at home. Kova. And a lot of times I can't do it. I can't express those emotions in that moment, but I make sure to find time, whether it's in the car, outside, or in my room, to still feel what I'm feeling. Really, dogs? So, what I thought I would talk about today, go lay down. Lay down. Lay down. Sit down. Lay down. Lay down. What I wanted to talk about today was yoga poses that could help us express some tougher emotions that maybe we're used to suppressing or avoiding, as well as how to feel and move through those tougher emotions, as well as finding ways within ourselves and within yoga to make sure that we're respecting and honoring our emotions and ourselves as often as possible. So the first thing I thought I would do is talk about some tougher emotions that we all tend to experience at least once a day, if not multiple times a day, and multiple versions of these emotions. The first one I really wanted to discuss was sadness or depression. As many of you know, I suffer from depression, and I constantly am working within myself to move through my depression and my sadness on a daily basis. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we find ways to communicate our feelings. And so with the kids yoga, you know, in an attempt to try to be a little bit more inclusive and give them the language to express themselves, I have started incorporating a little bit of American Sign Language just to help out. Now, of course, I am not an expert in American Sign Language. I do have a little bit of background in it, but I find that this is a good way to just add a little bit more help with expressing ourselves. And so the first emotion I want to discuss is sadness, like I said. And the sign for sadness is feeling sad, like this. And when I think of feeling sad, I think of the pose that my friend Sarah, who does embodied yoga, taught me, which was the vulnerable pose, where you are sitting off to the side with your legs like this. And normally her pose, you're being vulnerable like this, but when we're sad, a lot of times we want to hide ourselves and we want to hide our emotions. Lay down. And so we hide ourselves behind our face, trying to close out the world. And so I know when I feel sad, I tend to do some sort of pose similar to this. It can be very awkward. My legs don't particularly like to be in this pose because of tight hips, and I don't necessarily feel comfortable covering my face a lot of times and crying. And so it takes a lot of vulnerability to be open with your sadness. But the one thing that I have learned is that if all else fails and support is not externally there, you can support yourself internally by swinging your leg around, coming into easy pose, and giving yourself a comforting, supportive hug. Another emotion that I often feel, a lot more than I would like to feel, is a lot of times I feel frustrated. And so when I feel frustrated, a lot of times I feel overwhelmed, I feel nervous, I'm anxious in many ways, and a lot of times I feel the jitters inside my body like I've had it up to here with something or someone. More often it's something. And so when I spoke with the kids, what I did is I said, that the way that frustration was explained to me in ASL is that you've had it up to here, or you've had it up to here. And so what I did is I had the kids come into mountain pose. Mountain pose normally is a very strong, grounding pose, but when you bring it up to here, you feel the weight of your frustration and how overwhelming it can be to have it up to here. And so what we did is that when we feel like we're having it up to here, we take a breath in, and then we slowly push our hands down and exhale with it, opening up in traditional mountain pose and feeling that grounding effect. So we've had it up to here, and then we exhale down and opening up and grounding and finding stability in those moments of chaos. Inhale and exhale. Another pose that I discussed with my students was feeling angry or mad. So the ASL sign is you have a claw and you're mad like this. And a lot of times my anger comes from being frustrated. I'm frustrated and having it up to here. And so I tend to have a lot of anger toward myself more often than not about feeling overwhelmed. And so what I told the students is that a lot of times when we're angry, we are in fight mode. And so you feel a little strength. Koba, Koba, come here. Sit down. Thank you. Thank you. We feel strength, like in goddess pose. Quiet. But instead of having our arms up here or even out here, when we're angry, we're in fight mode, like we could lash out at someone. And so feeling that anger inside of ourselves and how we're balled up, we can feel that it's tiring in our legs, it's tiring in our core, it's tiring in our hands to be constantly in fight mode and feeling through our anger. And so what I had the kids do is I said, when you're feeling angry, instead open up your heart and feel the strength that you have within you and take control of your anger, of your emotion, and use it to uplift yourself or support yourself. And they seem to really connect with that. The fourth emotion that I discussed was feeling scared or afraid. And so feeling scared, and a lot of times when we feel scared, we want to hide. Pardon me, Koba. Pardon me. Come here. Come here. Oh, everyone's going to be so funny about this. Come here. Lay down. And so what I said was that a lot of times when we want to hide, we want to protect ourselves. And so we might go down into child's pose or modified child's pose to hide ourselves and our body, making ourselves really small because we're afraid. But instead, what we should try to do, and of course it's really difficult and it doesn't always happen, is that we should try to, once again, open ourselves up to those emotions, uncurling ourselves, stretching ourselves wide, shining our heart through into Cobra, and just feeling the openness as we stretch out, ready to accomplish anything that we put our minds to. The final emotion that I discussed with the kids was anxiety. So the sign for anxiety or being uneasy is to have a chair, like you're signing chair or sit, and then rocking it back and forth like you can't sit still, like you have the jitters. And what I likened it to is that those butterflies that you feel in your stomach, a lot of times it feels like you're falling or you feel unstable, uncertain. And so I had them prepare for camel and doing it without any support. Like they're just trying to hold themselves back and you're not sure if you're gonna fall. You have no support, nothing is holding you up, and it feels like those jitters. And so to alleviate that, you have to bring in, when you're feeling anxious, you have to bring in support, whether it's breathing or talking to someone, working through whatever the issue is. You have to find support for yourself and for the situation. And so what I had them do was put their hands on their ribs for support, to lean back, or I gave them blocks to put their arms on as a way to give themselves a little bit more stability when they're feeling uneasy. And then after we went through all of those big emotions and big poses, I ended the class by talking about ways that we can respect not only ourselves and others, but what the messages that the emotions are teaching us. And so we talked about a couple of different things that we can do to help with this. We talked about kindness, kindness for ourselves, kindness for others. And so, with that, I discussed that when we're kind, we're usually helping ourselves and others. And so I had them do the sign for help, which oddly enough is the mudra for commitment. Interesting. You learn something every day. And so what I had us do is I said that when we're working on being kind, we can help others. And so we stretch forward in wide-legged staff pose. But I also said you can't always help others. A lot of times we have to make sure that we help ourselves. And so we drew it back in. We also talked about a really important one that is really near and dear to my heart, especially with all of the boundary issues that I've been working through. We talked about consent. And so with consent, I explained to the kids that it's okay to say no. It's okay to say stop when someone is making you uncomfortable. That you don't have to sit in that and continue to experience it just for the comfort of others or to please others. And so what I had us do is we stood in modified warrior pose with our legs stretched back, and I had them do the sign for stop. And so I said, we put our hand out and I said, stop, which is very similar to Sarah's embodied yoga pose, which was no and having boundaries. But I said, stop. And we held this and felt within ourselves how uncomfortable it can be to tell people no. A lot of times we're told that it's not okay to say no, whether it's to parents, grandparents, family members, friends, bosses, or even strangers a lot of times. But that it was okay to tell people to stop when they were making you uncomfortable or doing something that they shouldn't be doing. The principle that I wanted to discuss was intuition, listening to yourself, whether it's listening to your heart, your head, or your gut instinct. And so what I had the children do is that we did the sign for listen, and then we came into easy pose with one hand on our second brain and the other one on our head. And we focused in on our heart space as we channeled any messages that the head and the gut had for us into our seat of love and compassion. And we just breathed through it, listening to what our body had to tell us in that moment. The fourth principle that I discussed with the kids was about giving thanks or having gratitude as a way to respect ourselves and others. And so for that, we discussed the sign for thank you, which is thank you. And then I had them come into hero pose with their hands at heart center in prayer or thank you mudra. And then I had them slowly forward fold over their hands as we thought about something that we were thankful for or someone. And then rising back up and coming back to center. The fifth and final principle that I discussed with the kids about respecting ourselves and others and our emotions was about forgiveness. And not general forgive everything, but more about forgiving mistakes. Because we all make mistakes. And a lot of times we're harder on ourselves and on others about those mistakes. Maybe because of perfectionism or feeling like we let others down or letting ourselves down. And so it's always a good principle to be open to forgiveness for mistakes. And so we signed the word forgive like this, with our hand open, drawing along the lines of our palm in forgiveness. This one, this pose the kids seem to really like. So what I had them do is, out of all the poses that I ever do, boat is probably my hardest one. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I've had C-sections. I do struggle with core work in general. And so I tend to have a harder time with boat pose in particular. And so what I had the kids do is we prepped with our feet tented up in front of us and our arms out in front, pointing to the side wall. And then I had them lean back, contracting their core, lifting their legs up, and then rolling out of it. And then getting back into position, trying pose the boat pose again, but then falling out of it. And being okay with not being able to be perfect. To forgive ourselves for not being perfect, for making mistakes. And then I ended the class with a discussion that if all else fails with any of our emotions, any of our poses, it's not the end of the world. It happens. We can get easily overwhelmed by our emotions. And what I suggested was that if nothing else, find rest and relaxation within yourself and try to reset and start over again. And so for that, my favorite pose is probably going to be Shavasana. And so I had the students come into Shavasana, whatever form they liked the most, and just allow their body to relax and rest and reset, focusing on their breath and their sensations within their body. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. I absolutely know that it's not perfect. And you know what? That's okay. I'm fine with not being perfect. So, until next time, thanks. Bye.